The Cartoonerific podcast is sponsored by the wonderful world of Animation Gallery, home of rare and wonderful fine animation art. Visit their website at wwagallery.com. And for our Cartoonerific listeners, you will receive a special 10% discount off any purchase if you purchase by March 25th, 2024. Just go to wwagallery.com and enter code CARTOON10 for your 10% discount. Once again, this discount is only valid until midnight, March 25th, 2024. Once again, visit wwagallery.com.
You're listening to the Cartoonerific Podcast, classic animated cartoons, with your host animator, Brian Mitchell.
Welcome to Cartoon Fun, it's Cartoonerific, yeah! It's Cartoonerific.
Well, welcome to the Cartoonerific Podcast, Classic Animated Cartoons. I am Brian Mitchell, and I'm your host. Last week, Willie Ito was here for the first part of a two-part interview, and that was a interesting, very informative, and fun-filled interview. And we have a little bit more of that today. So we're going to get right to it, right after this message. Don't go away.
Cartoonerific is the place to be to celebrate hand-drawn animated cartoons. The Cartoonerific Podcast features interviews with the magic makers behind your favorite animated cartoons, with episodes uploaded every Friday. Or visit the Cartoonerific blog featuring articles about classic cartoon animation. At the Cartoonerific Gallery, view original animation art and memorabilia from your favorite animated films and TV shows. The company store features exclusive swag from the Cartoonerific universe. And coming soon, brand new world premiere cartoons on the Cartoonerific channel. It's all here. Join the fun at www.cartoonerific.com. That's cartoon, ERIFIC.com. It's Cartoonerific, saving the universe one funny cartoon at a time.
Well, we're back. So we're going to get right to it today. This is the second part of a two-part interview with Willie Ito. Please enjoy. Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. And, you know, they really, what's interesting is those guys, I worked on a Tom and Jerry show maybe about in the mid 2000s, you know.
Okay.
Around 2000, about 2005 or... I did some storyboard work on Tom and Jerry Tales, but but we weren't doing these cartoons, even though everybody, you know, they got the models down, they got, you know, all the stuff working. I mean, they even got Eric Goldberg to animate an opening, you know. So you had all these people that love Tom and Jerry. And you know, and I just felt like we couldn't make them the same way. We couldn't, you know, they just fall short. They're just flat, you know.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and there was some kind of a magic that Bill and Joe had in making these Tom and Jerry's, you know, and then of course during that period, Tex Avery, some of his cartoons were some of the funniest ever. Also, you know, so
yeah, absolutely love that stuff.
Oh my God!
When you were working for Clampett, I mean, that studio. Okay, so Clampett Studio was basically on Seward, wasn't it? It was in the same building with Walter Lantz, or was that later?
No, Walter Lance was not at the Seward location, unless way down the line, Lance moved in there. But as far as I know, no. There was a fellow named Gippy Vaccaro who did a lot of animated works, religious animated films and all that took over that building. Now, that building was owned by the Clampett family.
Yes.
So it meant rent income, even though I think Clampett kept an office in there, but overall he subleased it to other companies.
Yeah, I was actually in there because his son was in there. The family was still using it. Yeah, they were still using it in the 90s. So I don't know if they eventually sold it or whatever, and they called it Snowball Productions, right? Wasn't it?
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Right. So you left when you were working on these Beanie and Cecils, and you did all the model design, transferring the look of the puppets into the animated form.
Yeah, right.
How was the production like on that, as far as time goes, and how many weeks did you have to work on each cartoon? Because it was for TV, I'd imagine you had maybe a week to lay out a 6-minute.
Yeah, it got to be a little chaotic because Bob himself, he was still directing it as if he was making Looney Tunes,
Right.
And some of the gags were, you might say, a little off color. And so the board of standards, or whatever they call them, at the network, would ask for certain scenes either deleted or modified or whatever. And Bob would promise he'll have it done, but he'd sit on it until last minute when our production manager with the film can under his arms would catch the red eye to New York in time to screen it. It's not like the technologies of today, so
right.
you just so poor Art Scott was the production manager, and it was so frustrating for him because knowing these changes were made, we would have to kind of squeak it by the networks. And so the networks would come back and say, well, that scene was never corrected, and Bob would say, well, we're going to take care of it. We're going to make all these corrections, and never really was.
Right. He was going to do it the way he wanted to do it.
So I don't know if the network has started to experience somewhat with John Q in a much bigger way of, John Q wanted to do it his way and his gags and whatever. And I think him and the network really bucked heads.
I found with like Jay Ward would do stuff like that. He would hide, they would do stuff in the cartoons and they'd object to the cartoons, and he was kind of a rebel. And I think Bob, and Bob was too. And then you get John K. years later, and it's the same thing. He's this rebel, and he's trying to get all these dirty jokes through. And so, and then some of these studios wonder, they say, "Oh, gee, nobody wants to buy our stuff anymore." And and it's because of that. It's because, you're not working with them. They're telling you they don't want this and they don't want this, and you just put it in anyway, and you think you just, just push it right through, and you just make people mad, and it just, you build this reputation. Yeah, and I have a feeling that
a lot of that had to do with Bob not getting another half-hour show,
Sure.
And yeah, so, and then, of course, Joe Barbera was such a salesman. He would go to lunch on a Friday with his writers, and they would sit around at lunch, and most of the guys like Dan Gordon and these guys were big drinkers, so they would be ordering one martini after another.
Right.
And they would start making little idea sketches on the cocktail napkins. And then Joe would pick up the napkins, put it in his pocket, and then fly back to New York. And then he'd show these little sketches at a network and sponsors meeting. And he was such a good story man that he would get up and start winging it.
Right.
Telling a story based on these sketches. And then the network and the sponsors says, Joe, you got a show. And so he'd get on the phone Sunday night and call Bill Hanna and say, Bill, you got to build up another crew because I just sold another half hour.
Jeez.
We were exhausting like every available animators, retired or even in rest homes to recruit and work on some of these shows.
Well, Joe,
it was incredible.
Joe was an excellent idea man, and I guess I heard of him going into a restaurant with it's a network executive and just doodling something on a napkin and pitching it, and then basically selling an entire half hour, an entire series.
Yep.
And
he was do that.
I also heard that basically he would just if he was pitching something that wasn't going over well, he might change the pitch midstream to see. Yeah.
He was creative enough to do that, and
he'd smell the way it was going, and then he would just change it all.
Yep, and of course he was very suave. He was always well tailored, and he had. He was like a ladies' man, and if he happened to be at one of the classic restaurants like Musso and Frank's, the young starlets will come in and say, "Oh, hello, Mr. Barbera." So he was quite impressive.
I'm sure. We were talking a previous show we did. We were talking about the first time I went into his office, and it was like, and it's like a nightclub in there,
It's dark and it's it's very because it's funny because Bill and Joe had offices in the same area there,
right?
And you go into Joe's office and its furnitures are all black and white and whatever, and then you go into Bill's office and it's in browns and earth tones and all that. It reflected the two personalities of these guys, and so people would always ask, were they friends socially and all that? But no, they, at the end of the day, they went their separate ways, and Bill was a scoutmaster, and he, little league type of guy, and Joe was Mr. Hollywood,
right. What I found interesting was because I had a meeting. I was working on the Jetsons movie, and okay.
So
I was, I was a hot kid in town in the late '80s, and so Bill Hanna got my number. I don't know where from because same situation, and he called me up and he said he wanted to meet with me. So, and I was getting married in New York, so so I heard this on an answering machine. I flew back to California and I drove through the studio gate and parked the car, and so I go inside and they take me to they show me Joe's office, which
Okay.
dark, and then I think it was Joe's secretary led me to the stairwell to go all the way up to the penthouse to
Where
Bill's,
Bill had moved office. Yeah.
Bill's office, and it was like a.
Right.
And what I found very interesting was that office was like a postage stamp in comparison to the luxurious office that Joe Barbera had. You know,
Right.
but Bill's office was bright because it was surrounded by windows, and so he let the light in.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. To this day, I still don't know why Bill chose to move up to what we used to call the penthouse, and
Right.
I don't know if it was anything to do with any kind of personality conflict, or Bill wanted to be closer to production, and being up in penthouse brought him closer to the ink and paint department, and a lot of the production area, because Joe was overseeing us, the creative group.
Right. So he would supervise the layout and lay out the presentation material. Right.
Right.
Because he was constantly selling. He would look over the storyboards too, wouldn't he?
Oh yeah. I would get a storyboard, and as I'm going through it, it'll say "See me, Joe," and so it may have something to do with the character design or how he saw that particular scene laid out, or so. And so, dummy me, I was working late one night, and I saw his black Cadillac pull up. And so I waited a beat, and then I figured, well, as long as I'm here and Joe wants to discuss this scene, I think I'll go and see if I can meet with him. So I go back there and I knock on his door.
Oh boy!
And of course, he had a and so, oops. so I tiptoed back to my office, and oh well. I think after hours, I just better leave Joe Barbera to his own.
Yes, to his own devices. Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Oh my goodness! I tell you.
Interesting. I'm sure there's plenty of stories like that.
Oh yeah, there is.
When you were doing layouts on Jetsons, do you remember how much layout work you had to do every week? Did you have to do like 30 scenes a week or something like that, or?
Yeah, I believe that there was sort of a unofficial scene count that we try to abide by, or try to stay close to it. They never really penalized us for not making quota, but knowing that you had to make this quota, you strive to at the end of the week, have at least close to that many scenes completed, but they never held you to it, because some of the Jetsons took a lot of imagination and a lot of research.
Right.
And so we were spending a lot of our time, doing research, going into Hollywood to the Hollywood bookstore and getting old, illustrations from the, you might say, the Buck Roger era, and Flash Gordon and all that,
Right.
Trying to get some idea. But after a while, as we got used to the concept, then we were pretty much free to just go wild with our own imagination.
Right.
And one of the guys that did beautiful research and things of that nature, his name was Jerry Eisenberg.
Oh, great talent.
Yeah, and he did some beautiful stuff on the Jetsons and all. And so we had quite a crew that would come in, and maybe the first few days they'd be sort of, not quite sure. But then, boy, everyone just kind of caught on and just got into it, and I think the Jetsons was one of the better looking early shows.
Oh, it's a very slick. It's a very slick looking show. And
it is.
Yeah. All those early, all the early Hanna-Barbera, I think everything up to, I want to say 1966, 1960, I guess, when they were acquired by Taft. Okay.
Yeah.
I noticed a change. I mean, as a kid, I didn't, because I loved it all, but
right.
Because I was, I'm not trying to make you feel old, but I was, I was five. I was 5 in 1966, so that kind of gives you. So.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So I was watching the Flintstones in the Ice Capades at Shea Stadium in 1965 or 66. Yeah. But
yeah. Well, actually, though, when Taft took over, they didn't dictate to us much of the creative aspects. They may have, maybe had the story department either modify or do more or whatever it may be, because Joe was always confronted with that phase of it, and when the networks came in and says, "Hey, we got to have." We have a lot of writers that could use extra work. These are live action situation comedy writers, and so we would like to have name credits, and so that's where we were pretty much urged to use accredited live action writers. And so now we had to set up a whole new department of storyboard editors, and they would take the scripts and do storyboards on it. And so the days of writers such as Warren Foster and Michael Maltese that actually wrote the stories by making little sketches and pinning it up on a board. And that was the good old way of how animated cartoons were written. And that's basically how Hanna-Barbera was doing it in the early periods until we had to work with I guess you might say bona fide screenwriters.
Right. Yeah. No, and that kind of changed the business.
Yeah.
Because everything was now scripts. And
yeah, I know.
Yeah. And it's too bad because, you had people like Tony Benedict that was, basically a great cartoon writer, but he was doing it through his storyboards.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So. Yeah. But with the years that I've been in the business, I've seen it go through so many renaissance, and then of course today, I have no idea how cartoons are made with all the 3D, animation and this and that. And so, I was just down the last weekend at Comic Fest in San Diego. And I was on a couple of panels, and one of them I was on with Tony Benedict, and we were talking about the golden age of animation and how it used to be, and and how cartoons are made today is a complete, I'm in awe of all of this technology, and but I'm in my studio now, and I'm drawing a Bugs Bunny setup in with my pencil and paper.
Right.
And in my backroom studio, I have a Cintiq that I have no idea how to use, but
yeah,
was in one, and it sat in a box until just a few weeks ago, and I've got an assistant. She's I guess you might say my protege. She's an animation student, and she asked me if I could mentor her, and I said I'd be happy to. But the first thing I'm going to have you do, as far as my mentoring you, is put my Cintiq together.
There you go. So she
did.
She gets something out of it, and you get something out of it. So it's a nice trade-off.
Yeah, right. Oh, I yeah. But so it's interesting to have seen how the industry has really changed right before my eyes. In essence,
Yeah, I mean it's some of the changes. I don't know if they've been for the better, but people have been using the Cintiqs, and I know Disney, when they were doing their animation, they would do the paper and then scan everything. Yeah. And then they went to the Cintiqs, and then they went back to the paper because they couldn't get, I guess, they couldn't get the type of line they wanted, or I don't know.
Yeah, that is a challenge, And, so, when I was in Florence, Italy, 2 years ago, and then it was decided that my book, Hello Maggie, will be made into an animated cartoon. My animation director, his name is Sandro Cluzo,
right?
And he's you know who that is,
yes.
And so anyway, while we were there, he was working on a Cintiq, and I had never seen someone working with a Cintiq. And Tony and I, we were rather fascinated. But then when I gave it a try on it, I thought, wow, it doesn't feel right, the texture and this, with my supposedly pen and whatever. And so I just sort of said, well, I think I'll stick to my old ways. And then when we started production on Hello Maggie, I received a Cintiq from our host in Florence, Italy, and I knew exactly what it was in the box.
Right.
So I chose not to open it. So it sat there for a year in the original box until I got my protege to set it up for me.
Right.
And she ordered a screen that you could over to, so you could get the like a pencil texture. So I've yet to try that out myself, but
it's the Cintiq has it's basically the surface is glass, so
right.
It's like drawing on a cell, which the pencil or the pen is going to glide, and
exactly.
And when you draw on paper, it's a different feel. I mean, it's basically there's the surface feel of the paper, the pencil against that, and generally it's not glassy. It's not glidey, and so maybe that's part of the thing, and you got to get used to that. But it is,
and plus the fact that I do commissions where I do original pencil drawings, and then I hand color it in pastel, and I recreate scenes from Chuck Jones's pictures, Frizz's, Tex Avery, and a whole list of Hanna-Barbera characters. And, they're in an affordable range where, I take I usually get a table at Comic Cons or Comic Fest or whatever.
Right.
And I get these fans that them. But if I'm working on a Cintiq, I don't know how I could get drawings that I could sell.
Right, because you're selling prints. You're selling prints of these things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So. So I'm from the good old fashioned days.
What's the when you worked at Hanna-Barbera? Just going back to that quick. You worked on Jetsons, and then did you work on Magilla Gorilla? Did you do any of that stuff?
Oh yeah, Magilla was one of those, and as a matter of fact, coincidentally, I was just looking at some. They made a documentary during the production of the Magilla Gorilla show, how it's written and layouts and animation and all that, and they ran the special just prior to the premiere of the Magilla Gorilla show, and so my protege, she found it and sent me the link, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh,
you're in it. You're in it. Are you sitting with Jerry Eisenberg?
Yeah,
yeah.
With Jerry and Dick Mickenbach.
I think
we all have on shirts.
It was a black and white show. I think it was George Harriman was the narrator.
Yeah.
And
that's it.
And
that's it.
And it's called, and I believe it's called "And Here Comes a Star" or something like that. Or "Here Comes."
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had a full head of black hair at that time. I didn't have a midsection paunch. I keep looking at that thing. Who's playing me back then?
I gotcha. Yeah, I kind of look at myself now because I was a young whippersnapper with hair. At least I had hair back in the day. Now I have no, practically nothing. But
yeah, same here.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
When did you leave Hanna-Barbera? You were a fixture there for a while, right?
In 1975, one of the guys that I worked with, his name was Takashi Matsunaga. He was from Japan, and he got a deal with Sanrio, the Hello Maggie, Hello
Kitty,
Hello Kitty, to do a feature, a co-production with an American and a Japanese crew, but the studio was set up here in Hollywood. And so Takashi asked me if I would join him as like a production coordinator, because I knew all the people in our industry, and I would be a good one to be able to pick and choose a personnel, So I agreed to do that,
right.
And he was able to get some of the top guys out of Hanna-Barbera to join him. People like George Singer and Don Morgan and a bunch of people that was anxious to work on a feature film, and so that was in 1976. We went into production. Unfortunately, Takashi is not Walt Disney, nor is he Joe Barbera, nor is he even Walter Lantz. So the production had no guidance by a good storytelling director. And so about halfway through the film, it was now beginning to go way over budget, and the president of Sanrio kept making trips every 3 months here to review what was going on, and it was getting to be a little scary, So And then putting in late hours because I was coordinating the American crew that would come in at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning and leave at 5 or 6. The Japanese crew would come in at like 10 o'clock, and they would work till midnight, 1 o'clock, and then they want to go out and eat and drink and just party it up. And as a production coordinator between the two groups, I had to kind of more or less stick with them throughout this whole, you might say, ordeal. And so finally, about 3/4 of the way through this film, I resigned and decided, I am absolutely and totally burnt out with animation. Mm-hmm. And I got this opportunity to return to Disney and work in comic strips. And of course, comic strips was one of my true loves back then. So I was able to go back there and work in comic strips. But it wasn't too long after that comic strips was on the wane because syndicates were now, at the mercy of television and the whole bit. So right. Syndicated comic strips weren't selling and whatever. And so the Disney strips like Mickey Mouse, Scamp, Winnie the Pooh, and all that, Donald Duck, it was still going. We still had a crew that worked on it, but they were on payroll. And so the studio figured, wow, we're paying hospitalization and all the benefits, and the strip is not making that much money for the company. So they finally decided to turn the entire comic strip department over to the bullpen at King Features in New York. Okay. And so here in our department, which was, not so much in limbo, but now with consumer products building up, we were able to segue into consumer products, and that's how I ended up with consumer products. And then next thing you know, we had over 800 Disney stores all over the world. Right. And our management, Michael Eisner, felt that we should have a group of us, not to police them, but to be able to go there and work with the regional artists and all that. So that's when I started my whole new career with Disney as the director of Character Art International. Wow. And I just traveled to all these different countries that had Disney offices, mentoring young Disney artists. So it was a great way for me to end my career, traveling on the Disney dime.
Well, what's interesting? So you ended up working on I would imagine, T-shirts and stuff like that. I mean, and making sure that design is right on the money. They're good poses and stuff like that.
Yeah,
like toys.
We did see some of that, but at the inception of the Disney stores, we were selling merchandise basically the same as what was being sold at Disneyland. And so people would come in, like the store that we met at, the London in Glendale. Right. And this, hey, that's the same T-shirt I saw at Disneyland 3 weeks ago, or that's the same figurine and whatever. Right. So then it was decided we've got to create brand new merchandise, and the collecting market was really at its peak at that point. Right. We had so many Disneyana collectors and all, so we had to develop things like limited edition prints and figurines and that whole program of the Disney collectibles, and do some.
Was that the classics, the Walt Disney Classics collection that they had? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, right. So these things were created, and then of course, at the very inception, we were going down into the Disney Studio morgue and pulling out original cells and drawings and stuff, and putting the Disney seal on it and selling it. But then the realization hit that these cells are going out of sight value wise, and so it was cheaper to recreate them. So we created or called back a bunch of the veteran ink and paint girls, and so all of a sudden overnight our ink and paint department was full of old timers as well as new trainees, cranking out these reproduction cells, and the studio found a great revenue source with collectors, and so that's suddenly the Disney stores, selected Disney stores that sold the high-end collectibles became very popular, And then as I would go to our Disney stores on the Champs-Élysées in Paris, France, or down in the Ginza in Tokyo and all that, oh man, it was always crowded with fans and people buying, classic Disney art, and it was something else. And then, of course, in their respective countries, they would create merchandise that was sort of synonymous with the taste of the consumers of that country.
Right.
And like in Japan, everything was kawaii, which meant cute. They loved the cute Mickey and Minnie holding hands, the wedding scenes, and things of that nature. And then you go to Italy, and the merchandise there was very edgy. They liked the Karl Barks, Donald Ducks, and so you had different tastes throughout the world. And so when I would come back and make a report as to what I have seen or what sort of suggestions or criticism, I'm thinking to myself, these are very wonderful representative of Disney art, but with their own, taste and appeal and all that. So I never really made any kind of critical changes. I felt that Italy should stay with their slant. The Tokyo should stay with it. Tokyo is like the follower in Asia. So Hong Kong and Korea and all of these other Asian countries kind of follow the Tokyo's bent on Disney characters.
Right.
But so it was kind of interesting to try to work with all of these different artists, and so it was a good way for me to finally throw in my pencil and retire.
When did you retire? Yeah, you're not really retired. You're still doing stuff, but when did you leave Disney?
1999.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I had 23 years with Disney, 22 years with the combination of Hanna Barbera, Warner Brothers, Clampett, all the different. So it was a total of 45 years, basically.
Wow.
But it felt like 75 years of work.
What's the favorite project that you worked on? Is there anything that you're like, I really loved working at Warner Brothers or whatever? What was your favorite?
Yeah. Well, of course, my very first and very impressionable was when I sat down at the desk and started to do my very first drawing of Lady. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm actually working at Disney and on a feature film for Disney. So that has to be kind of my sentimental favorite, whereas most of my friends will say, oh, I bet you were going to say Mickey Mouse. I said, no. For this Lady and the Tramp. For Hanna-Barbera, J. Michigan the Frog was one heck of a memorable short that I worked on. And then, of course, What's Opera Doc,
Right. Wow.
Yeah. And then, of course, to be able to work with Bob Clampett, converting the puppet characters to cartoons. And then at Hanna-Barbera, my gosh, a multitude of fun shows that we were lucky enough to help create and all that. And one of my favorite, because I had a lot to do with, was Hong Kong Phooey.
Right.
And I even found Scatman Crothers to do the voice and a little bit. So,
oh wow. Wow. That show keeps coming up for some reason. Hong Kong Phooey.
Oh yeah.
We had a guest on. This was Matthew Bates, he's a talented guy, talented animator, and he, we were talking about Hanna-Barbera, and they said, I said, so, we're talking about his favorite shows, and one of the shows was Hong Kong Phooey. It came up.
Oh
yeah.
So. Yeah. Oh yeah. It was fun, and of course, I approached Pat Morita first,
right?
And I said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing a voiceover for a cartoon character?" He says, "Yeah, sounds great." I said, "Well, why don't you call me Monday morning? Come on in, and then we'll give you an audition." And so Monday morning came, and no calls, and so finally Wednesday, I run into him at one of our local hangouts, a place called Imperial Gardens, and I see Pat at the bar, and so I call him over and say, "Hey, what happened, Pat? I thought you were going to come in and audition for us." Yeah, my agent called and sent me over to Warner Brothers for an audition, and I got the part. I said, "Oh, yeah, what was that?" Says, "Mr. Imagi in Karate Kid." I said, "Okay, I guess you don't need Hong Kong Phooey."
I guess not. Well, I'm sure Scatman really enjoyed getting that part. So. Yeah.
We did the same thing. We met him at the Hollywood Bowl. And that's not where they had the concert, but it's a bowling alley in Hollywood that had a cocktail lounge, and he was performing. And myself, Jerry Eisenberg, and Don George, we were in the audience. And after his set, which we thought was really funny, I flagged him over. He came to the table and bought him a drink and asked him if he might like to do audition for a cartoon character, and he was interested. So I ran it by Joe the next day. He said, "Well, that sounds good, So Scatman came in and did an audition tape, and he got Hong Kong Phooey.
There you go. Oh my God.
Yeah,
it's great. Anyway, I want to thank you for coming on here. If anybody wants to get a sketch from you, they want to buy a sketch from you, is there a place they can go to? Is there a website or
they could easily email me, or
if you want, I mean, I can set up something where, if somebody's interested, we'll direct them your way. They'd have to contact us, and then we'll send them your way. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, that'll be very good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Willie, Willie, thank you very much for spent a lot of time with us. I just want to let you know, the work you've done over the years is, whether it's been in the merchandising part of it or the Hanna-Barbera part or, the work for Beanie and Cecil or the Warner Brothers cartoons.
Oh, yeah, right.
Very much appreciated. It was an honor to have you on. I just, I think the world of you. So, just
Thank you very much. And I did enjoy our podcast together, and so anytime. So and anytime you happen to be coming out to California, just give me a call and we'll get together.
There you go.
Yep.
I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about. So,
of course we will. Yeah.
Okay, Willie, thank you. And I want you to have a great evening. And thanks again for doing this. Appreciate it.
Okay, Brian, and stay dry if it's still raining in New York.
Oh, it's pouring. It's pouring.
Do you have any questions or comments about the podcast? Please email Brian at cartoonerific.com. Your email may be featured in one of our future shows.
Hey, thank you, Willie Ito, for that wonderful second part of our two-part interview. It was really wonderful. I really enjoyed talking with Willie about this stuff and his career. I hope you did too. I've gotten a few comments from people that said they really liked it. Haven't heard from a whole bunch of people, though. But if you really like the second part, please let me know. All right? Because I'm here and I will respond. I will say, hey, thank you, or I'm sorry about that, or something. If you do like what you're listening to, please tell a friend. Just tell somebody. Just go, I dare you. Just walk up to somebody in the supermarket, tap them on the shoulder, and say to them, hey, have you heard about this guy, Brian Mitchell, and his Cartoonerific podcast? Now, I'm not telling you have to do that, but I mean, if you do that, that'd be kind of interesting, I think. Anyway, next week we have on a very special guest, and it's funny how I'm avoiding telling you his name or her name. That's kind of funny, right? Okay. Anyway, if you like what you're listening to, please subscribe. Now, there's a bunch of different services out there. Let's see, you got Google, and you got Apple, and you got Spotify, and I think there's one called Stitcher, and Alexa, and there's a whole bunch of different ones. Just subscribe, and they'll let you know when the very next Cartoonerific Classic Animated Cartoons podcast with your host, Brian Mitchell, is available to listen to. Wouldn't that sound kind of cool? That it just comes up? Just right in your face, says podcast available now. I think that's pretty neat. Anyway, I want everybody to have a great day. I want you to have an excellent week. And I really appreciate you tuning in. I really do. So thank you.
And it's all that we have for the show tonight. And we hope you had a cartoonerific time. Thank you for tuning into Cartoonerific. It's Cartoonerific. Whoa, whoa. It's Cartoonerific. And that's the end of the show. It's Cartoonerific. Brian Mitchell was your host. It's Cartoonerific. Thanks for tuning in.
This has been a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
The Cartoonerific podcast is copyright 2024 by Cartoonerific Studios Incorporated. All rights reserved.